Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala. I want to welcome you all on behalf of Young Muslims and FYI Institute. Welcome to our program, Real Talk. And inshallah, today we'll be discussing the issues that are affecting and impacting the youth in America throughout the country. So things like drug, sex, and alcohol, the questions you may have had, or whatever thoughts you might have had as young Muslims in America, this is your chance to get them answered. So inshallah, there's 5 questions that we're going to focus on. And as you're listening throughout, please have your questions ready and in mind, and please do email them to us. So the first question that we'll be looking to answer today is, what risk behaviors do the American Muslim youth face? And what are we associated with? What risk behaviors? The second question we're looking to answer today are, why are American Muslim youth, why do they want to express these behaviors? And the third question is, what are our communities, what do they need, and what can they do in order to educate and empower the youth to keep away from these risky behaviors? The fourth question we're looking to answer today is, how do we, as American Muslim youth, how can we bring ourselves out and away from these behaviors and habits? And the fifth question, inshallah, it's going to be the question and answer session in the end. So the 2 speakers I'll introduce in a second, they will be going for 20 minutes apiece, and then in the end we'll have a question and answer session. So please send your questions, if you have any, to questions at ymsite.com, QUESTIONS at ymsite.com, questions at ymsite.com. Now inshallah, before we move forward, let me introduce our 2 speakers. Our first speaker for today is Sister Sameera Ahmed, Dr. Sameera Ahmed. She's a professor at Wayne State University, and she's also an associate editor for the Journal of Muslim Mental Health. And our second speaker is Brother Sadiq Patel, and he's also a student for doctoral studies at the School of Social Services, Service Administration at the University of Chicago. And inshallah, they'll be looking at these questions, and they'll also introduce FYI, the institute in charge of conducting these researches and studies. So before we move on, let me repeat one more time. #YMRealTalk, and if you have any questions, please send them to questions at ymsite.com. Questions at ymsite.com. Jazakallah khair, and I'll hand it off to the speakers now.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulina wa habibina wa sayyidina Muhammad ibn Abdul Muttalib thumma min ba'd. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this webinar. Right now, as you can see, we have our PowerPoint presentation on the screen. And so really we want to take you through the topics that Brother Saad introduced us to. So my name is Sadiq Patel, and what I want to do first is introduce the topic, Real Talk, Drugs, Sex, and Alcohol, American Muslim Youth and Risk Behaviors. And so hopefully we want you to leave learning different aspects of what's going on with Muslim youth, why these behaviors are happening, and what can you do as young Muslims in order to help individuals who may be struggling with different challenges. And so we're going to move on, inshallah, but before we start on the topic, we really want you to know who we are and what we do and why we do what we do. Our institute is the Family and Youth Institute. And the Family and Youth Institute is a nonprofit research and education institute. So what does that really mean? You know, our main goal is to prevent problems before they happen. Oftentimes you see people seeing therapists once the depression has gotten so bad that they can't function. Couples see a counselor once their marital issues become so problematic that they need to see someone. But what we want to do at the Family and Youth Institute is to prevent these problems from occurring in the first place. So what we do is we first conduct research, and then what we do is we create programs based on that research. So oftentimes we hear stories about drug and alcohol use, parents having issues with their children, you know, young couples that got married and now they're considering divorce. But we never really know, is that something that happens all over the US among all Muslims? Is that something that happens on the East Coast, Midwest, or the West Coast? Or is that something that just happened to your friend and it's just one incident that rarely happens? And so what we really want to do is explore what's really going on with all Muslims across America to really understand what are the issues impacting young people, young Muslims. So research answers that question. It lets us identify the problem. To what degree does the problem exist? Where does the problem exist? why is this problem even happening, right? Because without this information, we then can't move on to the second half of the question, which is how can we prevent these problems? What programs do we need to develop in order to ensure that these problems do not occur? And then, what do we do to prevent these problems from occurring? And so, for example, let's look at one example. A lot of you young folks are going to be considering the idea of marriage. And the question becomes, well, how do I find the right spouse for me? Well, what the FYI did is we actually looked at research among all young couples in America. And then we looked at research with young Muslim couples. And we found what were the things that couples that had good marriages looked for in a spouse before they got married. We looked at divorced couples. What happened in their marriages? What things do they wish they looked for in their spouse when they were searching for someone to marry? And we took all this information based on research and we compiled it into a single workshop. And this workshop then now allows young people considering marriage to know, what do I look for in a spouse? What things should I consider? So that when they get married, they set their marriage up for success because they found someone that was compatible for them. And that program that they attended where they learned all this information was all based on research among American Muslims in America. And so that's how research informs community workshops, and that's what we do here at the FYI. And so moving forward, inshallah, we have a lot of endeavors that we're doing at the FYI. One of the endeavors that we have is we create short videos. You know, how else do we prevent challenges from happening? Through education. One example is we create short 2-minute video clips on various topics. One thing I want to point out is in the next month we're going to be releasing a 2-minute video animation about 7 things to consider before saying I do. For all you young Muslims who want to get married one day, who may be going through the marriage process, who are considering getting married, who may be married, this is all very useful and important information that as young Muslims you should educate yourself about so you can prevent challenges from happening later on. It's easier to avoid challenges. It's harder to change things once the challenges have presented themselves. So that's what we really want to focus on. We want to focus on prevention. Bismillah. And so what we want to then go on is talk about the infographic. So many of you on this call saw the infographic. And many of you were able to look at the statistics. So what are some of the statistics we found on that infographic? 48% of Muslim females in college, 57% of young Muslim males in college are engaging in premarital sex. 19% and 28% are using drugs. 17 and 28 marijuana, 48 and 45 are using alcohol. And so the idea is, what's the point of presenting these statistics? Do we really want to present Muslims in a negative light? Do we really want to scare individuals? Is this a scare tactic, something to kind of get people upset about? And the answer is no, it's not. The idea is what we want to do is educate young Muslims about the challenges that are occurring with Muslims in America. We cannot begin to solve a problem until we understand the problem, until we understand to what degree the problem exists. And so that's what our research does. And as many of you already are leaders or future leaders, you have to be able to understand what the problems are facing Muslim youth and their families today, so that tomorrow you're able to create the programs that'll address these problems, that'll solve these problems. And as a community, we need to start reframing the way we look at these risky behaviors. Many of us, when we see statistics like this, we think to ourselves, subhanAllah, 48% of Muslim females and 57% of Muslim males are having premarital sex. They're engaging in zina. Who are these Muslims who happen to grow up in Muslim families but aren't really practicing Islam anymore? Who are these people? And we create this us versus them mentality. We're good and they're the bad Muslims out there. And as a community, I really want to stress how we need to reframe the way we look at this. We need to begin to develop a we mentality. What do we need to do as a community to reduce these numbers? And more importantly, what kinds of programs do we need to create in order to reduce these statistics? And how do we make Islam more relevant to the majority of Muslims? So I'm going to take a second, inshallah, and I just want to encourage everybody, please write questions in. We're going to start the presentation, and it's really important that you all write questions and really engage with this material. A lot of this material is going to probably be new to some of you. And this is really important to ask those questions during the question and answer section, inshallah. So one thing I want to say is questions@ymsite.com. That's the link. Send the questions there. Questions with an S at the end at ymsite.com. Send us questions. We really want to answer them. So I'm going to move on. And so typically what we're going to have is a PowerPoint presentation, inshallah, but it looks like what we're going to do instead is I'm going to throw out a word, marijuana. And so when I say the word marijuana, a lot of you are probably making a lot of assumptions about someone when you hear the word marijuana. What are you thinking? Deadbeat, waste of space, not a practicing Muslim, off the right path, off the sirat al-mustaqim. We may even make assumptions about their parents, siblings, friends, and their schoolwork, right? But I want us to notice that all we've done is created judgments about that individual using marijuana, and all we've done is created judgments about the people that are in their lives, their parents, their family members, their school, their friends. But we have not begun to understand why someone may use marijuana. What's going on in their life? Something must have happened. And one thing I want to stress is we can't serve people we look down on. It's important to understand that individuals make bad decisions. Every individual will make a bad choice. But as a community, how can we provide these individuals with support, resources, compassion, and mercy to help them make better decisions in the future? So I want to tell you a story about a brother named Muhammad. So Muhammad is someone you grew up with. You went to the same masjid, Sunday school, family parties. You saw him everywhere. And I know you all know someone like that. But as you all got older, you've all chosen different paths. Some of you have become organizers for YM, for other organizations. Others of you have focused more on athletics, maybe schoolwork. But now Muhammad hangs out with a different crowd. He parties. He goes to the bars. He hangs out with the druggies, the party animals, and he does stuff you really don't want to know about. So the question becomes, what happened to Muhammad? Did he wake up one day and decide he wanted to suddenly change? He wanted to hang out with new friends? Or was this a gradual process that over time Muhammad began changing, slowly by slowly? Or was there more to the story? And so I want us to recognize that when we hear these stories of young people using drugs and alcohol, there's an entire narrative, there's an entire story that exists behind the person. We cannot begin to address that challenge before we understand what's going on and the breadth of the challenges we're having. Okay? And so that's something to be very mindful of as we move forward through this presentation. I want you guys to be critical. I want you to ask yourself, look, I get that 47% of Muslims are engaging in premarital sex, but what's going on? Because that's just a symptom of the challenge. But the real problem is, how do we get to the root of the challenge? And that's what we want to focus on. So let's talk more about Muhammad's reality. Muhammad's parents are always screaming, yelling, fighting with each other. It's really stressful at home. When his parents are not fighting with each other, they get on his case. His grades are never high enough. He doesn't do anything right. They're constantly comparing him to their friends' children, to your neighbor's son, or your dad's coworker's son or daughter. So he takes every opportunity he can to leave the house, or he just stays in his room. Do you guys know someone like that? Do you guys know someone that whenever they go downstairs, subhanAllah, all they hear are criticisms? What are you wearing? Why are you dressed like that? How did you do in your exam? Why didn't you get an A minus? Why did you got an A minus? Why didn't you get an A? What happened? Can't you do anything right? Why can't you be like so-and-so's son? Muhammad wants to do better in school, but he doesn't see the point of trying because nothing seems to work. He gets an A on a test, but that's not good enough. He becomes class president, but that's not good enough. He starts going to the masjid more often, that's not good enough. He starts applying himself in Islamic school, that's not enough. He starts praying 5 times a day, but that's not good enough. There's always something else he's not doing that's being focused on. He feels sad, dumb, and he hates his life. Everything is a critique. Nothing he does is ever good enough. As you're growing up and as you're thinking about Muhammad, you have to think to yourself, this person must think that he's incapable, not smart enough, not educated enough, not intelligent. The people who are supposed to care about him and support him don't. That's the world he's growing in. So one day, a few of his friends told him to try marijuana to help get the edge off of things. The first time he tried marijuana, he felt numb inside, as if all his problems suddenly disappeared. He eventually started using it whenever he couldn't deal with life stress. Because no matter what he did, even if he did well in school, in athletics, in masjid, it was never good enough, right? There was always some criticism. But marijuana provided him that relief. It provided him that ability to feel calm in his environment. And so let's look at some of the challenges happening in Ahmed's life. His parents mean well, but there's a lot of stress occurring between his parents. Constant fighting, arguing, yelling at home. He's constantly being put down, right? He has the motivation and desire to succeed in school, but he doesn't see the point anymore. He's sad, he feels dumb, he's depressed. Muhammad. And so really understanding that there are so many factors going on that are contributing to this problem. And so really thinking about what else is going on and how can we create programs, how can I be an individual, a support system in the community to help individuals like Muhammad manage the stressful circumstances. Because if we don't provide support to individuals, they're going to find other means to provide that support for themselves. They're going to start engaging in risky behaviors. They're going to start drinking alcohol, using marijuana in order to relieve that stress. So inshallah, we're going to move on to the next slide. And so what do we have to look at? Sister Sameera is going to be discussing this one, but really understanding, look, now we know that there's an individual, he's using drugs, and there's so much more going on in his life. So let's look at each one of those factors and understand what we can do to better understand your situation.
Assalamu alaikum. So continuing on with what Sadiq was talking about, when we think of Muhammad and what are the issues facing him, and on the surface again, it seems like Muhammad's engaging in all these behaviors, but when we look down deeper, we realize there's so much going on in his life. And then for us to really think about, it reminds us of the Prophet ﷺ and how he was towards the believers. And the Quran mentions in Surah Al-Fatiha about being merciful towards each other. And one of the things that when we know a Muhammad in our life, that we should also really consider being merciful and compassionate towards our friends who may have made poor decisions, and understanding what are the different, and helping us to understand what are the different factors that may have impacted the decisions, as opposed to judging. Oftentimes in the community, when we see a young person who engages in such behavior, we automatically judge them. But I think part of it is for us to be a little bit more compassionate and understanding, and try to understand what are the issues impacting them. And so what we know from the research is that there are multiple things that can really impact our decisions and our behaviors. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, we know that who we are as individuals and the people around us and the different situations we experience, such as an incident like a car accident, or experiences that we have had with our friends, or news. Even the news has an impact on us, and how people are talking about Muslims, or our experiences in, say, like Ramadan. So all of these different factors really interact with each other and has an impact in our experience, how we see the world, and how we interact with the world. So that's kind of looking on the left-hand side. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, what we see is that all of these factors interact with each other as well. So if you think about it and look at Muhammad, in Muhammad's case, each parent has a direct impact on us. right? And, each parent had a direct impact on Muhammad. But so does the quality of their relationship, their marriage, the fact that they were upset, they were angry, they were fighting. All of that has an impact on their marriage, but also has an impact on their parenting abilities of Muhammad. In addition, their friends have an impact. Our friends have an impact on us, which then impacts the rules that we abide by, what we agree on, what we believe in. And so all of these factors, our parents' friends, our school environment, all of that impacts us, and we impact them. So, for example, if you think about this classroom, our teachers and classmates can impact us. Does our opinion matter? Do our values and beliefs matter? Are they respected? Do you feel isolated in the classroom? If you feel isolated or not supported, then you're less likely to speak your mind. Unless there are other factors that may be in place to help you speak your mind. And so those are all things that we need to consider, not only for ourselves, but those who are around us. What are all these different factors that can impact the behavior that we see in the end? So going back to Muhammad's case, parents were all fighting all the time, no one's happy, everyone's stressed. He's on edge, never knowing when he's going to be attacked, either verbally or physically. You don't know what's going on. The messages he was getting from his parents was, "You're not good enough," which hurts a lot for us as kids. What our parents say and do and how they see us, whether we want to admit it or not, really has an impact on how we see ourselves and our self-esteem. So even though Muhammad might have tried hard in school early on, he never got the grades he wanted. He, in this case, had a learning disorder, which his parents and teachers didn't realize, and then he actually needed a different strategy to learn than it was being offered. So all of these factors, again, are not factors that we may see on the surface, but they actually have an impact on how the person experiences the world around them. So in his case, he felt dumb. He felt like he had nothing to offer. No one, and that there was no point in trying. And so in all of these experiences, what you see is one thing after another really having an impact on how he sees himself. So in this case, not wanting to be at home, doing poorly in school, poor self-esteem, they all interact with each other, resulting in him deciding to hang out with people who are willing to accept him just the way he is, which for Muhammad felt nice. For once, I'm good enough. And oftentimes we may feel this way, that we're never good enough for anybody else. So once we find a welcoming environment, we just want to be there. And so, someone like him, one of the things that they decided you might do is use drugs as a way to kind of help them feel better. Again, people may use substance, alcohol, drugs for different reasons, but this is one of the reasons to help you feel better. When in reality, that's not a good long-term solution. So again, for us to think about, do we know? Are we Ahmed? Do we know friends who are Ahmed or Khadija in our environment who may have gone through that same process? So for us to really understand what may be going on and really think about, well, what can we do about it? So moving along in terms of what can we do, first of all, we need to really know ourselves. What we find is that in these behaviors, if you think about Muhammad again, we know that there's certain factors that really can have an impact on our decision making as young people, right? We really need to understand ourselves better, so that one, we don't accidentally take that pathway. Two, if we see our peers potentially heading in that direction, we can get help. And three, if we know people like Muhammad, we always keep a lifeline open for them to grab and come back and come closer to us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created each and every one of us with a unique set of characteristics that we really need to know about ourselves. Because oftentimes we don't take the time to reflect. And the Prophet ﷺ reminds us, no act of worship is as meritorious as reflection. So reflect on Allah's bounties and the work of His power, but do not try to reflect on His essence and being, where you will never be able to comprehend it. And so the idea is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created each and every one of us with a unique set of characteristics. that we really need to know about ourselves. Because what we find is these factors can really allow us to get the help we need when we need it for ourselves and our friends. Now, if we know this information, we know how best to support ourselves. What are the pitfalls that we may encounter? What are our strengths? What's our personality? I mean, if you think about just even our personalities, because each of these elements are gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Some of us may be more social, outgoing in our personalities. Think about how can this aspect of our personality be used positively, and how can this aspect get us into trouble in our interactions with those around us? And if you think about this is what we talk about in the field about risk factors and protective factors. The protective factors are those things that can protect you from the challenges that lie ahead in development. And risk factors are those factors that can really increase our likelihood or increase our vulnerability to engage in certain behaviors. So, for example, if you think about, if someone's more social, which is a great skill to have, alhamdulillah, but sometimes that can be misinterpreted when you talk about gender interactions. It could be misunderstood in terms of parenting. You may be voicing your opinion, and parents may respond in a way that they may experience it as being disrespectful. So really understanding our personality and how we can use it positively. Say, for example, you have a friend who is always sick due to physical health problems, right? They may miss school a lot. Well, now, the fact that they're sick, they're missing school a lot, those are what we'd call risk factors. And so what may happen as a result of that is they may feel excluded or left out or not on top of things. So for you as a friend, imagine what that might feel like. If you're able to help them feel included, you're decreasing that risk. The fact that your friendship is there is then resulting in protecting that in your friend. So again, being aware of what are our personality, our health, what are our natural skills and interests and talents, what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that we can use to help strengthen us? And what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that could increase our vulnerabilities? And so if we really think about that over and really reflect upon it, because everyone has certain strengths and everyone has certain areas of growth. Oftentimes people around us, maybe parents or others in the community, may focus on certain things like academic intelligence, which is important, but we also need to realize there are different types of intelligence, such as emotional intelligence, street intelligence. So some of us may have a little more of one area of intelligence than others. So are you aware of what your strengths are? Are you able to use your strengths positively or negatively? So these, again, are things that you want to think about to really know who you are, what your positive and negative strengths are, how can you strengthen yourselves and allow these strengths and these skills to be positive and help support you, and then identify if you have struggles that you may have. Say, for example, if you're attracted to the opposite gender. Well, if you know that there is so much material available online that can really distract you and direct you a different pathway, well, if you know that's a struggle, let's be honest. Let's figure out what you can do to help support you so that you avoid engaging behavior that wouldn't be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Really be honest with yourself, understand yourself, and really know what you need to do to help navigate the challenges you face. So continuing on, I think Sadiq's going to talk a little bit about friends.
Yep. And so, inshallah, we're going to, continuing on, we're going to talk about the other factors that play a role, inshallah, in this area. So, one thing that I want to focus on really is understanding how friends play a critical role in terms of our development. The types of friends you have, the treatment of others, the activities you engage in, the positive or negative attitude that you have, those all play a critical role in terms of the engagement of the development of young people. So one important thing that we always have to recognize is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, a person follows the religion of his friend. So the type of individuals you surround yourself with are going to play a critical role in the behaviors you acquire. So if you are around people that engage in risky behaviors, sex, drugs, alcohol, you are more likely to engage in those behaviors. It doesn't mean you will for sure, but it increases your likelihood because that's what you're hanging around. That's what you're surrounding yourself with. But we also have to take that a step further, that while risky behaviors is one realm that can be influenced by your peer group, so are other things. If you're around people that are constantly backbiting about other individuals, that increases your likelihood that you will likely take on those qualities. Judging others, feeling superior. So we have to recognize holistically that the impact of our friends is very broad, and they can in fact influence us in many different ways, engaging in risky behaviors. When I say risky behaviors, that incorporates behaviors such as alcohol use, drug use, premarital sex, gambling, tobacco use, but they can also impact your akhlaq. And so recognizing that you are in the company you keep. You are in the company you keep. A person follows the religion of his friend. The next thing is treatment of others. Really, really understanding how the way you treat another individual is going to impact their development. So if you're someone that puts somebody down constantly, makes fun of them, bullies them, you're going to impact their self-esteem. They're going to feel less of a person. They're not going to feel good enough, worthy enough. And that's going to impact their long-term development. They're going to grow up feeling less confident, not being talented, not having abilities to be successful. Conversely, you also have to recognize that if you're the individual being mistreated, you have to understand the impact that has on your own development. And so as we're going through these different risk factors, as leaders, which I'm sure all of you are, community leaders, it's so important that you all think about what can I do to decrease the risk of this? How can I create positive environments where individuals are creating healthy friendships? With individuals who aren't engaging in risky behaviors, with individuals who are really committed to bettering themselves as people. How can I reduce bullying? How can I ensure that people in my community are confident, are believe in their self-worth, their ability to accomplish things? And finally, positive or negative attitudes. And this is really important because this is one of the most important things that determine the risk factors individuals engage in. Self-esteem. Self-esteem. As an individual, are you confident in who you are, or do you not feel confident? Do you have a low idea of self-worth, sense of self? Do you have a low self-esteem? Self-esteem is such an important factor in terms of individuals engaging in risky behaviors. What do I mean? Someone who doesn't like who they are, or someone who doesn't have a high self-esteem, wants to be accepted by people, and they will look for any group of individuals who will accept them. And so if they don't feel accepted by their peer groups in the masajid, they're going to go and find other peer groups outside of the masajid who accept them, who make them feel welcome. And then they will take on those behaviors or those qualities. You always hear this question come up. Well, I know my friends drink, but they don't judge me like those people at the masjid do. They don't look down on me like those people at the masjid do. So who's a better person? An individual who drinks but doesn't judge me, doesn't put me down, or people who don't drink but put other people down and mistreat people? And so we really have to understand how we treat individuals is going to impact what they associate Islam with. So as individuals who are community leaders, activists, organizers in the masjid, how our every action, whether it's fair or not, is being observed by other individuals who may not be as active in the masjid. And so as we move forward, this really ties into the last idea, is how do we develop a community? We are, as young individuals, such as YM, this is a virtual space right now. We're engaging in discourse, dialogue, through a virtual space. We're not in a masajid right now. We're not at an MSA after-school program. We're not at a university campus. We are having a discussion, a dialogue through the internet. And so recognizing that the Muslim community is no longer limited to the masjid. The Muslim community is expanding beyond the masjid, and we use the term third space. You know, we have organizations that specialize in teaching Arabic, Islamic studies. We have organizations that focus on youth, that focus on converts, that focus on African American Muslims, Arab Muslims, South Asian Muslims, that we are growing as a community. And so this idea of the masajid is also expanding. And so when we see this growing number of third spaces, both physical and virtual like this space, we have to realize that these spaces are being created because individuals aren't necessarily finding the relevant programming within the masjid. So they're looking outside. They're looking for programs that are specific to converts, that are specific to Black Muslims, Latino Muslims, that are specific to youth, that are specific to dealing with racism in our community. And then what we're also finding is many Muslims are just seeing the masjid and these other third spaces as completely irrelevant, and they're just leaving Muslim communities altogether. And so what are we going to do as future leaders, as current leaders, to address this challenge? And how can we start to create communities of inclusivity and communities where people want to come and be part of because they see that it's relevant, it's not judgmental, it's inclusive, and they're going to help cultivate and foster their Islamic development, spiritual development, emotional development, social development, slowly, incrementally, where they feel it's on their pace and not the pace of other individuals. And so as community members, how do you change the culture of a community? And changing a culture of a community doesn't mean you accept haram actions. Haram is haram. But that doesn't mean that an individual who's engaging in haram doesn't have the ability to be part of a community. And so how do we work together with individuals who are struggling with their Islam in order to bring them back so they can feel like they can be in a masjid, to be in a third space, without feeling like if they don't do everything right, they're going to be kicked out. So we're going to move on. What I want to reiterate are a couple things. Questions@ymsite.com. Questions@ymsite.com. And please visit us on the Family and Youth Institute on Facebook. Like our page. And what I want to also point out are some resources, inshallah. The FYI.org. And then these other resources are all online resources. So the FYI organization sends out articles every day about various challenges, depression, mental health challenges, family challenges, raising children, marriage. Great articles, very informative. And then here are some other resources: Stones to Bridges, Amala Helpline, Nasir Helpline. These are all online resources that you can use anywhere. Heart Women and Girls and Muslim mental health providers, okay? So inshallah, I'm going to turn it back to Brother Saad, and we're going to start looking at some questions, inshallah.
All right, inshallah. So do you guys want to just start off now, or?
Sure. I just want to also let people know that for those individuals who may be parents who are online, to just realize that there is another version of this presentation that we did last month. So please go onto our YouTube page as well as our Google. All the information will be on our on the Hangout. So please go there. You can get that information, as well as we have a couple upcoming events taking place that people may be interested in. Starting in November, we'll be presenting at Muslim Masculinity Conference taking place at Princeton. We have another webinar online that will take place next month, and we'll be doing a 2-day workshop on mentoring Muslim youth in Chicago, Illinois. So for those of you who may be interested, that would be really beneficial, inshallah.
All right, inshallah. So we'll start off with the first question. So the question says, Subhanallah, the Muhammad story is analogous to my close friend's story, but I don't think people start marijuana because of depression. I always imagined it was a social cool thing to do. Not because they had to, but because it was cool to do. I mean, there's probably statistics about it. What else is there on why people started?
So I will say a couple things about this, and inshallah, Dr. Sameera will have much more to say, inshallah. So one thing to recognize is that is one way people may start using marijuana. They may think that it's the cool thing to do. But the one thing that I wanted you all to take away from this is that the story is a lot more complex than just one incident causes someone to use marijuana. Because they think marijuana is cool, that's why they're smoking it. It's more complex than that. And so, two things to keep in mind. You know, individuals who have what we call substance abuse problems use that in order to cope with their challenges. And that's what we call addictive behaviors. But then other individuals use use marijuana, alcohol, just to have fun, recreational purposes. But the one thing to keep in mind in that instance where people are using it for recreational purposes is they're part of a social circle where they're using it as well, typically. So individuals whose friends use marijuana are also using marijuana. So we have to really look deeper. It's more than just it's the cool thing to do, but you also have to think about what caused this young Muslim to be surrounded with individuals who are using marijuana. And so to really, really start to understand everything that happened to get them to that point where now marijuana was an option in order to have fun. Whereas it could have been basketball. It could have been going to the movies with their friends. It could have been spending a night playing video games with the guys in the masjid. So how did that young individual get to that point, inshallah?
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to what Sadiq was saying, what we know from the research is that, first of all, the research is at the beginning stage. So there's a lot that we still want to know and we don't know. But from what we do know is that in terms of the research, that a lot of people do start off for social reasons, to hang out, and spend time and for recreational purposes, as Sadiq talked about. But then what we find is that it becomes a lifestyle choice. It may start off with just experimenting, but then it eventually becomes something that they may want to do, and they may do it for self-medication purposes. So there are multiple different reasons why people may use. The example that we used of Ahmed was just one way somebody may start off with, but just to let people know that what we do find is social recreational use is where we start. It's where people tend to start by experimenting.
Thank you so much for that.
So I'm actually going to take the next question.
Go ahead.
So the second question that I saw was somebody said, how can you meet a Muslim girl to marry her if your parents aren't Muslim, because it's not okay for men and women to just talk to each other? Just to kind of bring, I'm assuming that individual is someone who may have reverted to Islam or converted to Islam. And to just let you know, actually, that's actually an area of research that we're looking at FYI. We just presented last year on the topic of challenges facing convert youth. And what we found is actually this is one of the biggest issues and challenges of our youth. And so for us, to just acknowledge that you're not alone. And this is not, there are many individuals who are experiencing this challenge. Second of all is in terms of male-female interaction and purpose of marriage, definitely there are different schools of thought, different ways of approaching it, but you are able to talk with the intention of marriage, and if you're able to clearly indicate that that's what's going on. We do have recommendations of how to go about doing that, and hopefully you'll be seeing a video that comes out next month that I would highly recommend. And to actually look on our website, thefyi.org/ to be aware of that. But in terms of addressing what are the specific things that you can do, what we found other young people have done is really found that really having an adoptive family is really important in terms of integrating into the Muslim community, into getting the word out, telling your friends, your elders, have people look out for you. Also, engaging in activities that you are more likely to find like-minded individuals. So maybe get involved in YM, get involved in MSA, get involved in mass, whatever, Mina, help out with mentoring, be involved in the masjid. These activities, individuals who are like-minded, and may create opportunities for you to see if this would be somebody you might be compatible with. So that's just another way of doing it, of approaching the process. And really, it's important for you to get the word out with individuals in your social network and talk to them and let them know that you are looking, help them identify what are the things that are of interest to you, and help you with that process.
Okay, so I'm seeing the next question, Sameera. I think that I'm going to ask it, but I would like you to answer it, inshallah. And so, so this question goes to really double standards in a community. So a sister is asking, or a brother is asking, that they've seen this double standards where if a male engages in premarital sex, a Muslim male, they're kind of given a free pass. You know, parents or community members will say boys will be boys. But when a girl engages in the same haram act, there is a backlash that occurs. The backlash is much more extreme than maybe the backlash a male would have. And so I believe this is an adult or a mentor. How do I respond to my youth girls when they ask, why can boys do it when the brothers do it all the time? Question mark. Premarital sex is haram, and that's my response. But I don't think that response is good enough for these young girls anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add some thoughts on that issue. I think the first step is really important for you to acknowledge that what they're saying is valid. The fact that, unfortunately, culture trumps religion in many of our communities when it shouldn't. Even so, culture, what we find is culture may have a double standard, but religion doesn't. Culture is made up by humans, and humans are flawed. The religion is not. So that I would start off with that. The second thing is, as a culture, we also need to change that culture. It's unacceptable. It's just the same. But having said all that, what we also educate our young people, males and females, and help them understand, yes, there is a strong need, there is a strong attraction to the opposite gender. The challenge is, as a community, we don't talk about it. We don't help empower young people to address it. You may have the need, you may have the desire, but what can you realistically do to handle those issues? What are the situations? Because, you know, for a young woman or a young man who is physically attracted to the opposite gender and gets an opportunity, it's really hard to say no. And so if we can educate our young people and help them with role-playing different scenarios and be real about it, don't be fake. You know, what are the scenarios where these situations may happen? How can you handle it? How can you get out of it? And find safety lines that they can really use when they know they're starting going in a direction that wouldn't be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So really, as a mentor, acknowledge, talk about change, and really try to make change in educating the community. 3, also helping to empower young people to address and deal with their emotions and feelings in a way that is acceptable. And 3, really acknowledging that things may happen and really role-playing how to get yourself out of these situations, and, well, first of all, preventing them, and then if you do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always merciful, there's always a way back to Him, and really thinking about, even when you've messed up, even when those situations happen, to really realize the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always there, and to really go back to Him, and to make tawbah, make change.
I also want to emphasize what Sameera mentioned about double standards, and recognizing that double standards do exist oftentimes within our communities, that males and females are oftentimes held to different standards. And we see that in terms of just masjid spaces. The amount of space allotted to a female is significantly smaller than a male. The programming may be more geared towards one gender and not the other. And so to recognize that this is just one of many, many double standards that young girls are seeing throughout their lives. And so to really acknowledge not just this specific issue regarding double standards when it comes to premarital sex, but just the constant double standards that they're seeing throughout their lives, from early age until adulthood.
All right, so the next question is, so this person is saying that I've been in college for a few months. I've been in college for a few months, and it seems like hookah is the okay thing to do. What is the first step to breaking this social okayness of hookah? Also, these drugs are a social associate. People drink and smoke because their friends do as well. It's pretty hard to convince them to change their friends groups. In the Muhammad example you gave, should we confront him and have a deep talk with him, or just try and be his way out?
So one thing about the Muhammad talk, the Muhammad example, and then we'll move on to the beginning of the question, inshallah. One thing we have to recognize, often, when we see people engaging in behaviors that are obviously not in accordance to our religion, or we often have this savior complex where we feel like we have to do something. What they're doing is morally wrong. And so the first thing is to remind yourself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a plan for everybody, and that what's supposed to happen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to will it to happen, inshallah. So make dua and be sincere in terms of your the purpose or the reason why, or the intention behind why you want to engage with Muhammad. Is it because you want to save him? Is it because you are upset by his actions and it makes you angry to see him drinking or engaging in other behaviors? Or do you sincerely want to see the best happen for Muhammad? And so to really purify those intentions and understand what's the real reason why I want to first talk to this brother. The second aspect is really, you can't make people do anything, but you can be a support for them. You can have an open door policy with them. And so engage with them in a way where no matter what, they're going to come back to you, let's say not today, not next week, but maybe in a couple months, once they've thought about their actions, if they want to change. If you are harsh, abrupt, make them feel judged, tell them what they're doing is wrong, they're going to not want to ever come back and talk to you. So just keep in mind, whatever you say, it may not affect them now, but if it does 2-3 months down the line, that there's an open door policy where they are willing to come back and talk to you and sit down with you and engage in a conversation about their desire to want to change.
Just to add to what Sadiq had mentioned, is to also kind of think about, in addition to really clarifying your intention, purifying your intention, to having that, being that support. What we also find, and I think you mentioned, whoever was asking the question, there is a strong social component. And realize that this time, as human beings, we are social beings. We want to connect with people. We want to be with people. And that sense of belonging is really heightened during our teen years and our college years, or when we're young adults, because we're really trying to figure out who we are, where we want to, what do we identify with. And so as a result, what we're finding, the hookah lounges are really kind of the place where a lot of young people are hanging out. That's where they're socializing, and so many people are feeling social pressure to go and attend and be part of that group. What we find is a lot of people don't realize the health effects of young people, of the impact of hookah use or shisha use. And so people also don't realize how it is, considered prohibited in Islam. And those who do know may not care. And so when you talk about someone, when you're working with individuals who you care about and you love and you really are concerned about, you'd want to know exactly where are they in this whole thing. Do they know it's not acceptable but they don't care? Well, that's a different approach you might want to take. Or are they individuals who just don't know? Because oftentimes, many of our cultures, shisha use is part of our culture, and we may think there's nothing wrong with it. So if it's that type of individual, then maybe a little bit of education would help. But if it's, I know, I don't care, do what you want attitude, then, you might want to consider, well, maintaining the friendship and really thinking about educating a different way. What are alternatives that you can offer to going to the hookah lounge? Can we be doing other activities? So really think about alternatives. What is the reason? What does that type of environment do for the person? Is there something that you can do? And really kind of brainstorm those types of things, as well as educate, because a lot of people are not educated on these issues.
Yeah, and I know time is coming to an end, so one thing I wanted to emphasize for all of you is, inclusivity, really, really, really trying to understand the story, the narrative of an individual before creating judgments about that individual. I think the story of Muhammad really illuminated that example. There was so much going on that unless you had a face-to-face conversation with him, unless he felt very comfortable to open up to you, you wouldn't have known all those details about his life. So really realize when you leave this webinar, the one thing to take away, there's a story behind every person, and there are a lot of reasons, and valid reasons in some cases, that may cause an individual to behave the way they do. And so to really be compassionate and merciful in terms of how we engage with other human beings, inshallah. A couple things, we did receive a lot of questions, very good ones and interesting ones. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go through all of them. But please check us out at www.thefyi.org. And please go to Facebook, join our group, join our page, and you will get a lot of really interesting, very fantastic, very informative resources through that page, inshallah.
I just wanted to add a couple other things. Like Sadiq said, we're not able to address all the questions, but please do email us. You know, if you're struggling with an issue or topic, you know, we've got a lot of eating disorders within the Muslim community. We have people engaging in self-harm, a lot of different topics that we're seeing on campus, we're seeing in high schools, and amongst young people. Email us. And even though we couldn't answer the question now, perhaps we can send an article. We send articles Monday through Friday that are psychoeducational and that can help you address some of the issues you may be struggling with. And you know, so please send us, email us, give us topics you're struggling with, you want to know more about, you need more help with, and we'd love to help you out. Check out our website. We have a lot of different research studies that would help to educate the community. And webinars and videos and infographics. So please use us as a resource for YM, for your youth group, for your community, and really let us know how we can be of service to you.
All right, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Sameera and Brother Sadiq. So I just want to thank the audience for coming out. Alhamdulillah, this is our first program with the FYI Institute. So inshallah, please do check out their page. Also like the YM page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, YM Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Young Muslims. So I want to thank you all once again. Inshallah, this is the first of many initiatives, and I want to thank the FYI Institute once again just for reaching out to us and working with us, better cater to youth of the United States. So Jazakallah khair, everybody, once again. You all have a good night, inshallah, and if you do have follow-up questions, you can still reach out to the email we provided or go to the FYI.org, to their website or to their group on Facebook. Jazakallah khair once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.